Hey everyone, so let's talk about the builder pattern. Now, the builder pattern, in a very direct way to put it, is a way of abstracting the creation or the construction of objects. Now, this may seem similar to the factory pattern, but there are some key differences. Now, imagine that you had an object in your application, right? So you had an object in your app and you had users accessing it, right? Accessing it and instantiating this object. So you had the old guy with a top hat instantiating your object. And the difference is that instead of directly instantiating your object, the builder pattern presents a way to abstract this instantiation in another layer, and there you can have special or specific stuff that you can do before instantiating the object. So the difference is that this is the default way that we work with objects, right? And the builder pattern will basically create an abstraction layer on top of your object creation to allow you to do other validations or stuff like that before doing the object instantiation itself. Now, on front-end development, this channel I'm using JavaScript, right, to create all the examples. In JavaScript land, we don't use the builder a lot, but it's interesting to know. It's mostly used in OOP, Java, and stuff like that, but there are ways to make it work in JavaScript, even if that normally may be more abstract or complex way of implementing the solution to your problem. It may be interesting to know. Just as a note, I wouldn't recommend you to try to apply builder everywhere you see. There are specific scenarios, like one that I will show you right now, that it would make sense to apply the builder pattern, right? Now, for the example, imagine that you had a system that actually was used for car renting, right? So you have a system that do car rents, right? So you have the users. Let's use the old guy here again. So the old guy could go into your application and actually rent a car, right? So you would basically do all the process, the abstraction of the process to go and rent a car, basically. So now for this application, imagine that you had like the car. Let's talk about the objects, right? The entities that you would have in your application, entities, right? So you have the entities in your application. So you have the car, and we can also have a person, right? Because this old guy with a top hat is a person, right? He's a customer, but he's also a person in the first place. So we could have a person entity, which would be like the base class for the customer, right? So you have a person, you have a customer, which inherits from person. You have the car, and you also have the car rental, right? Which basically binds the person or the customer with the car they are trying to rent, right? Now imagine that to rent a car you had specific validations, right? So you would have, and I have that as a note here, imagine that you had these validations here, basically. So very fast cars with more than 200 horsepower are available only for premium customers. And also very fast cars, more than 200 horsepower, are available only for customers with more than 30 years of age, right? For safety reasons. And the person must be over 21 years of age to actually be able to rent the car, and the car must have the maintenance up to date, right? So these are the validations rules. Now, normally what we do, at least on JavaScript land, is to bind the validations to the UI, right? Now, what I will try to do here is show a different approach. And as I said, It may be not be ideal for all the scenarios that you have, but it's just something that you can think about, and this may come in handy in the future, right? So to apply the builder pattern here with the validations, because as I said, let's say that whenever you instantiate a car rental which binds car with the customer, we want to do all the validations to make sure that everything is following these validations, right? Before creating the car rental entity itself, like the instantiation of the object. So we could have a car rental builder here, which basically will create a car rental instance, which by itself basically has a car and a customer, right? So we have the car rental builder that has validations, and then we have the guy here directly actually instantiating the class, the car rental class, directly through the car rental builder, right? So let's code it. Hey, so I have my VS Code open here, and I have already set up the base for the project, and I already created the entities and also the skeleton of how we want to call them. The only thing that is actually missing is filling up the builder class, but just to go through what I did here, we have a car creation, so that's kind of how we want it to work, right? So we have the car, the person, the car rental, and the customer, these four entities, right? So here I'm just instantiating the car. We have a horsepower prop, and if I open the car entity here, you can see that we have horsepower, model, and a boolean to set if the maintenance is up to date, right? Because we have a validation that depends on it, right? So I'm just setting these properties here. Then I have another one that creates the person, actually the customer. Let me just rename it, because the person is the base class, right? And to go through the person class, we have an age, and also we have a name for the person, and then the customer inherits this, calls the super constructor, which in turn calls the person constructor, right? And then we just have a flag to set if the customer is actually a premium customer. Then we have the car rental, which has the car and the customer. And then we have the builder, which I have to set up. But just to go back into the main file, you can see that we create the car entity, then the customer entity. And then what I did here was to call the car rental builder, which is this class right here that is not actually filled, right? I have to actually do all the validations, and I will do that together with you. So I'll do that, right? And the build method here should actually return this.car rental, right? Because we are keeping a local instance of the car rental, and we only want to return that if all the validations here are actually true, right? So that's what we want to do. So let's start with the validations. So the first validation that we want to do is for the car. We want to check if the car has all the maintenance up to date. So if car.is maintenance up to date, let me just copy the name of this guy right here. So if car is maintenance up to date, if it isn't up to date, right, we throw a new error and say that the car maintenance must be up to date, right? And then the customer, we do a similar thing, but first let's set this value, right? So this.carRental dot set car to be car, and then let's return this just so we can have chaining, right? We can do actually that. And then for the customer, we want to check if the customer is over 21 years of age, right? So if the customer dot age is actually less done 21. We want to throw an error saying that the customer must be over 21 years of age. And then same thing, right? If this validation is correct, we return set customer to be customer, and we return the context. Then for the build part, we want to check if the other two validations are actually correct, right? For the horsepower. So first validation, if this dot car rental dot car, let's first check if the values are actually set, right? We want to throw a new error. Car must be set. Same thing for the customer, right? And if all the values are actually set up, we want to check for the horsepower. If this car rental dot car dot horsepower is greater than or equal to horsepower limit, which is 200, right? If it is true, we want to see if the customer is a premium customer, right? So this dot car rental dot customer dot is premium customer, this flag right here is premium customer. This should be true, right? This dot car rental dot car dot horsepower greater than 200, and this and the customer is actually a premium customer. This guy is false. We want to throw an error saying that the customer must be a premium customer. Now, similar thing for the age, right? The customer must have an age greater than 30, right? So if the customer age is less than 30, we want to say that the customer must have at least 30 years of age. If everything is correct, we return the car rental, right? So that's pretty much it. Now let's go to the main file. You can see that we have the car here. I have a Ferrari with 50 horsepower, which is weird. But just as an example, right? Then we have a guy called John, which is our customer, with 28 years of age. You can see that the car everything is fine. Even if it's a Ferrari with 50 horsepower, which is weird, we have the maintenance up to date. So people can actually rent this car. But we have an issue here. John is actually 28 years of age, and also he isn't a premium customer. So we shouldn't allow John to actually rent the car, right? So if I open the console here, and let me reload it, let me just check if everything is correct. Car rental builder, if customer.age, if this.carrental.car.horsepower is greater than or equal than horsepower limit. Right, so first thing, you can see that it's actually allowing because the horsepower is 50, right? But if I actually do say that this Ferrari is actually 800 horsepower, you can see that it will not allow, right? Because the customer must be a premium customer. That's the first validation, right? They must be a premium customer. Very fast cars that have more than 200 horsepower must be available only for premium customers. But John isn't a premium customer, right? If I set John to be a premium customer, it will give us another error because John must be at least 30 years of age. So if I set the age to be 30, you can see that now it allows John to actually proceed with the renting, right? So John can rent the car. And let's switch from Ferrari to be just a simple car. And let's say that it has 30 horsepower. I don't know, but it's a car with 30 horsepower, and John is 30 years of age and also a premium customer. It allows him, right? There is no rules of actually blocking John to rent the car. But if John is actually 15 years old, we can't allow it because there is a validation, right? The person must be over 21 years of age, so it doesn't allow. If John would be 21 years of age, it allows John to actually borrow the 30 horsepower car, right? And then if the car doesn't has a maintenance up to date, it doesn't allow, right? The car maintenance must be up to date. So that is the idea of the builder pattern. As you can see, we created an abstraction on top of car rental entity to do all the validations. Now, what this allows you to do is to isolate your business rules from your models, so you don't burden your models with all these validations, right? Because, for example, let's say that we have the customer created here, and now you want to expand your system, your car rental system, to also allow customers to buy cars. If you would if you had burdened your models with all the validations, like let's say that you did everything on the customer file, now you had an issue because you could have different rules to actually sell the car, right? It wouldn't matter if John would be a premium customer or not. He could buy the cars, right? It doesn't matter. And also it wouldn't matter if John is actually 20 years of age and he wants to buy a Ferrari that has, I don't know, 2,000 horsepower, right? He could buy it if he wanted, but now you have all the rules bound and your models burned by the rules, right? So you would start to have flexibility issues. To expand your application would involve a lot of rework, right? You would have to refactor all these classes. And what this builder file allows you to do is you isolated all the rules involved for building, actually doing all the car rental stuff. You could have another one, maybe car selling builder, for example, that you have specific rules for your car selling module. But now you have everything isolated. You can test this without issues in a isolated manner without having dependencies hindering your progress, right? So that's the idea of the builder pattern. I hope that makes sense. That's everything that I have for today. Have a good one.